I'm a rapper, I'm not a poet. Poet, I'm not a rapper. Guess it's opposite there, cause you niggas just got it backwards. Got me sick to my stomach. Go up on my lantern. New trio is Frio, the most terrible tandem. Deliver shock value, but no, not Timberlanding. Critical observation alerting you ambulances. Clap on and clap off. Rap on and rap off. Hard times for hard rhymes, that concrete, that asphalt. If I did look twice, I guess that's her asphalt. May I assist you and score, get my pass out. Matter of fact, it's what you need. Need some rest, you just fatigue. See, technically I'm foul, and Mrs. Wallace, I'm Rashid. Know this beat is a banger, have no reason for anger. If I'm slightly deterred, you know I'm giving the finger. Call my savage like Corey, but not in need of Topanga. Right like 90 degrees, you in the need of an angle.
Man, it's bringing us in again. We back. This is the Free Lunch Podcast. This your boy Tight, and I got my boy BG with me. How you doing, BG?
Ow.
That's how you gonna bring us in?
Ow.
What been going on?
It's a beautiful day, man. The sun's shining, birds chirping. It's good to be alive, man. How you feel today?
Man, I feel wonderful, man. Young, wild, and free. I think that's the motto for the weekend for me.
Yes, sir. The motto.
Yeah, man. I think we got us a good topic today, and I think it's something that really is going to kind of come off of some of the other podcasts we did, based off of the feedback and a lot of the conversation that we've had from people that are listening to the podcast and even reading the blogs. And it's really just going to be a combination of some of the feedback and trying to continue that conversation. But before we even get into all that, you know what time it is, right?
It's time for the vine. You got your stuff. You got your stuff ready?
Hey! I think I'm gonna get him a little bit of some of this old school stuff. But I think I'm gonna need you. I'm gonna need you to play a role.
Okay.
Huh?
What I need to do?
I just want you to. Can I call you Deacon BG today?
Okay, y'all can do that. I've seen enough deacons in my time. I think I can do that.
I want to take us back to devotion time.
We're going to devotion.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
Love
the Lord. Yes, sir.
You know why?
Yes,
Cause you know the song is. Today.
What is it today?
This little light of mine, ooh, I'm gonna let it shine.
Oh,
this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
Yes, sir.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Ain't
they
how they do it at the little white church we used to attend?
The little white church, White Street?
Yeah, man. I wasn't going to call it out. I wasn't going to get no shout outs, but we can call it
White Street Baptist Church, baby. Yes, sir. That's how you got to get the service started.
That's how we got to come. We're going to have a little church.
I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry. That's all tight.
Why you say you sorry, man?
Hey, because he one of them deacons, man. Them deacons take that stuff serious, man. You might get starved out here talking about them deacons like that. That's a dangerous game you playing.
When they say, I'm gonna let it shine, then they got to bring it back again.
This little light of mine.
This little light of mine. And the reason and you know, I always pick a song for a reason, right? So for today's topic, and as I alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, we kind of wanted to discuss live your truth. You know, we got a part 1 and a part 2, and based off of some of the feedback and some of the conversations that I've had with folks that have listened to the podcast, so those 2 particular podcasts. You know, it's been a lot of conversation and a lot of dialogue. and kind of want to get your thoughts on some of the feedback and dialogues you received from folks that have actually listened to those two podcasts, BG.
Well, yeah, and it's come from a lot of different angles. It's come from our male listeners and female listeners, and so it's just really interesting to see how what we talk about in this podcast is really crossing over, and it seems like we are accomplishing our goal in terms of just sparking conversations and having people just think about certain things maybe a little differently than what they've thought about. So some of the feedback, one of the things that we always talk about is purpose, and how do you get into your purpose, and how do some of your external factors, such as your environment and all those type of things, how those things affect your ultimate purpose. And one of the listeners just posed the question, what if you don't? What if you don't have come from a situation to where people are, maybe encouraging you to do certain things or encouraging you to open your mind and all that kind of stuff, and you're just out here fighting to find your purpose, and it just seems like every time that you make a move or make a decision on what it is that you're going to aspire to do, that you run into some stumbling block and you end up at square one. Some people that are fighting in their careers and they have in their mind, where they want to be, and it just doesn't seem to be working out for them. People are kind of seeking some guidance on what to do when you run into those situations. And that's that's kind of the tough part about this, that we talk about. And I think the biggest thing is that you stay patient and you stay hungry for it, because ultimately, in your mind, it might be that, or you might feel like you should be at this particular point at this particular time, but it might not be that time yet. But you can't quit.
Right.
You have to stay aspiring, like we say, stay present in the moment, because what you have in your mind and what you may feel like at that moment in time is your purpose may not ultimately be your purpose for that particular period of time. Right. And so, a lot of people want to just kind of quit and give up. But you can't do that. You can't do that. You just have to keep pushing until something breaks. And so that's just kind of the general advice, because, like we always say, we don't have the answers, but we can speak to what has worked in our lives. And that's been one of the things that I benefited from is, having this point that I wanted to be in my mind. But at that particular time, I just can't seem to get there. But you just have to keep working, keep planning, and keep listening and paying attention to the things that's going around. Because sometimes, whereas you may be thinking that you'll be guided or directed or have a path leading you to your purpose, sometimes your purpose actually finds you, and you just have to be really ready to step into that purpose. So that's one angle. That was kind of long. And then we also have some dialogue coming from some of our female listeners. That have taken we write a couple of blogs that talk about relationships and stuff, and we really speak to it from a male's perspective, and a lot of our female subscribers and readers of the blog have just really had words to say that it's good to hear the male perspective on certain things, because it helps to navigate when we know the other side's perspective. It helps you understand better what might be going on for a female, understand what's going on in the psyche of a man, because we think differently. And so we have to be, forever mindful that for us as men, we have to be forever mindful that women don't see stuff the way that we see it. They don't feel about certain things the same way that we feel about it. And so we have to be empathetic to those things. And so it's really just good to hear that people are really listening and taking some of these things in. And even though we're not giving answers, they're appreciating us posing this on this platform and giving them an opportunity to just think and spark some different conversations with their friends, families, and loved ones. So that's just kind of a summary of some of the things that I've gotten personally in terms of feedback.
But that's good. Those are some of the summary of what you got back from feedback. But what I'm gonna do now is kind of just to shape the rest of today's topic and today's conversation is first summarize Live Your Truth, the first one, and then kind of summarize Live Your Truth part 2, and then kind of shape the rest of the conversation around part 3 of Live Your Truth. So essentially in Live Your Truth part 1, we kind of talked about, and I've gotten some real good comments and feedback. But we talked about the Lion King, and we talked about Rafiki essentially hitting Simba on the top of the head and posing the question, "Who are you?" So a lot of the dialogue from Live Your Truth Part 1 was around authenticity and trying to understand who you are. If we fast forward to Live Your Truth Part 2, we continued the conversation around authenticity, but we also discussed how the David and Goliath story, and essentially discussing not the part where David just showed up and fought Goliath, but really discussing how he became equipped to defeat Goliath, right? So just from him, and this is kind of why I want to start the conversation today. And what I want to do is kind of pick up here because I actually had a revelation. The other day where it kind of even this particular story kind of just I had an aha moment with this particular story. But I kind of want to pick up here, and then for Live Your Truth Part 3, I want to kind of go back to the Rafiki hitting Simba over the head and asking the question, "Who are you?" So can we kind of do that for the next 20, 30 minutes? All right. So essentially, and you probably have a lot to say about this, but David was a shepherd. We talked about this in part 2, and I don't want to really summarize that. But the aha moment that I had was he was a shepherd leading sheep, and he would defend his sheep against the lions and the bears, right? We kind of established that in part 2. Well, the aha moment that I had was even when he defeated Goliath, he still was a shepherd leading sheep, right? Because the symbol and the ironic, the irony around this whole situation is that even though he was a shepherd leading sheep, when he defeated Goliath and became king, he was still a shepherd leading sheep. And so the reason why that's so profound to me is that even though you may be a coach or you may be doing something as an occupation, the next phase of your life, once you defeat the giant that stands in your way, can still be tied to that occupation or whatever it is, because he was still a shepherd leading sheep, because as king, he was still leading people. And the symbolism behind that is that we as people and as individuals are sheep throughout the, for those that read the Bible or whatever book you read, throughout the symbol of how we are sheep. And I just found that kind of ironic and kind of symbolic of really summarizing what we have been talking about, being equipped. If you do a self-evaluation of who you are as an individual, you'll notice that you become equipped to fulfill what your ultimate calling is.
to go further is just that, by, I guess living your truth and seeking and reaching purpose, that you ultimately have the opportunity to affect others, because to a certain degree, we are all David in some form of fashion.
Yes.
And by getting to that point, it becomes more of a global and becomes more of a communal thing, because like you started off, let your light so shine, that when you get into that moment and you get into walking in your groove or your purpose and stuff, like, you have the ability to change and impact people's lives. The further that you get into that, the further that you get into your passion, it just starts touching other people, and you just have that power and that ability to just really, make your mark on the community and the world that surrounds you. So that's another neat thing about this whole thing, which is why it's so important for us to step outside of just kind of our comfort zones and what feels good to us, and maybe start looking at this thing more of a way to, make others around us better as true leaders.
Right. And if you kind of look at it, and I mentioned this before, but David leading the sheep was a dress rehearsal for him to ultimately become king and lead a different type of sheep. But that once you catch that, and once people understand how throughout your entire life, you're becoming equipped and you're becoming prepared. It's almost like going to boot camp, or it's almost like, they send Marines to Paris Island. Our entire life is boot camp, preparing us for that moment. And even a text that you sent me from one of your friends, shout out to your friend for listening. She made a principle, and she kind of actually, after reading the text message, it kind of light bulb went off in my head too. Where I don't know if she coined this principle or if this something she read, but it was essentially the this and that principle, right?
Okay.
Where this being and I'll use David again as our example, but this being David had defeated lions and bears. So this situation, him defeating lions and bears, was really no different than the situation of him fighting Goliath in his eyes. So when you can understand and appreciate that this situation is no different than that situation, then you really can continue along your journey, and you really can ultimately defeat the giants that come in your way, because ultimately you have to renew your mind and understand that you become equipped to defeat that situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because boot camp has prepared you. So if you use the football analogy, you go to practice Monday through Thursday in high school, and then you go to those practices and you do all those things for that moment to play the game. And all those practices and those situational scrimmages and those situational scenarios at practice have prepared you for that moment. And so that's why it takes a renewing of the mind, and you have to, and that's what David ultimately did. As far as if you renew your mind, you understand that defeating those lions and bears and those small battles that you fought throughout your journey, because you become equipped to do that. It's just a matter of believing in yourself and believing that you've become equipped. And once you understand that those lions and bears are no different than this giant, so this and that, then that's another step, and you continue along your journey to fulfill this ultimate purpose.
In our present moment, with us being, 80s babies, and, we're getting to a point to where we're really growing, socially and growing professionally. What are some of those? What are some of those bears, some of those obstacles that we commonly come across in our day-to-day life that that can slow that process down, that can slow that process of getting to ultimately where you are destined to be. Those things that get in the way, that even detour some people from getting to that point. And I like to think of one of the big ones that we all are confronted with is just those naysayers on the sideline that tend to get in the way. When you start thinking outside of the box, or you come up with an idea and you want to explore that idea, the first ones that tell you that you probably don't need to do that, or start questioning you as to why you want to do that. And then you get so much of that, then you start questioning yourself. And then you back off of going down that road to seeing really what's out there. We talked about this in one of the other podcasts too, is that, things like prejudice. So sexism and racism and all those type of things that hit us in the face, in our workplaces and social, clubs or whatever, that get in the way, that, tend to or set out to withhold certain things from us because of, what we look like, what our gender is. So I guess one thing to do, as well as identifying and working and trying to figure out what your purpose is being aware of what some of these giants are that will arise when you start going down this path, and being prepared on that end to know when I step in this building that this is a possibility, but I'm prepared. I've got all my paperwork in line. I got all these resume builders that I need to get this job, so that if you deny me of this opportunity, it won't be because of my merit. It won't be because of my work. It'll be because of your own ignorance. And even when you face that, and you're confident in yourself that you can go to the next place and continue on and be good with that.
Yeah. And I think you kind of setting me up for really getting to the core of what this podcast is about. Is almost the perfect alley. Because you know how in part one, we talked about the noise and we identify, how relationships, whether it be with family members or whether it's with your friends, can be noise that essentially discourages you from continuing along your journey and your path. We talked about social media, of course, how that can be a hindrance. And kind of today, what I kind of wanted to actually talk about, and we kind of sung about it, was let there be light. And to answer your question, I actually think it's two things that happens. It's the noise that kind of prevents us from having the courage to continue to move forward and press forward. So we have to figure out how to block that noise so that we can continue to essentially follow our heart and listen to our intuition. But the second thing, which I kind of want to talk about for the remainder of 15, 20 minutes or so, is this whole idea of how thoughts become things. And essentially, the old pastor would say, and listen at this quote right here, but the old pastor would say, you may not be what you think you are, but what you think you are. You may not be what you think you are, but what you think you are. And so I think, to answer your question, the second thing is that we create a world for us that we are not even conscious of, because you can either be in the world or you can be creator of the world. And once you understand that that your current situation, your current where you reside, where you currently reside today is essentially based off the world you created, then I think that that is an additional step in continuing along your journey, right? Because if you know who you are, then you have the power to create the world for that's going to be aligned to your journey and your path, and stop living in the world and stop living in someone else's world.
That makes a lot of sense. And what you put out there in the atmosphere, like your words are kind of your bond, and your words are reflective of what your thoughts are. And so, when you put something in the atmosphere, you almost set up a contract to those words. And so whatever you're saying, then your actions generally have to follow your words, and your words are your thoughts. And so it's important. It's important to be think positively and get positive results.
Well, let's even take a step back here. Listen at this right here. So I think I said something. I want people to see if they caught that. The first thing and what normally happens, BG, is that we're living in someone else's world. So rather than when you know who you are and when you understand where you're trying to go, then you become the protagonist in your world because you become conscious of what you're building. Today, what happens is unconsciously, and I'm eventually going to jump into Let There Be Light blog that I wrote about, but consciously, we're living in the world of and I got to get on social media, but that's the perfect example. That's the perfect example.
Social media moment.
This is it.
Okay.
But I got to get on social media,
all
right?
Go.
Because we're protagonists in someone else's world. We're trying to be a protagonist in someone else's world if you use social media as an example, where if I'm reading someone else's status or I'm reading someone else's what they've done, and I try to recreate that world rather than understanding who I am and what I'm trying to do and using that energy and those thoughts to continue to create my world. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So even if we go to Genesis 1:3, which this is not a biblical podcast, but I like to use it as reference points because most people understand it. But I read that passage one day, and it took me some years to really understand what that passage was saying. And that passage essentially says, and God said, "Let there be light." Right.
Right.
So the first thing that He created in His world, which I want to summarize as being an example of how we create our world, is to create light. And I thought about that and on the front end, most people, they'll hear that and they'll say, "Let there be light." So, okay, he turned on he made the sun, and they'll stop right there. But if you really think about what he's saying in that scripture, he's saying, "Let there be light." Light is symbolic of consciousness. So essentially, when you're living your truth and when you know who you are and you understand that you become equipped with whatever it is to fulfill your calling, then the world that you create, you'll create a world with consciousness. So essentially, you'll be aware of the world that you're creating, and you'll create a world that's going to continue along that journey. Golly, boy, that's
you preaching, boy.
Golly.
You preaching. You preaching, ain't it?
I ain't trying to, but think about that though. So if you know who you are, and you understand that you become equipped to fulfill a calling, then when I start to create my world, which we are little G's, a lot of people, they don't like to hear that, but we're little G's, right? And we have the ability to create our world via our thoughts and our visualization. Then we need to be conscious of the world we're creating. So we have to have light, and we have to have consciousness and awareness, so that as we continue to create our world, we understand what we're creating.
Mm-hmm. And I was watching. This might be a little bit off, but I was watching an interview, and it was a very good interview between Muhammad Ali and a white European interviewer.
I saw that
back in the late '60s, and they were just sitting down and they were just really having a real sincere talk.
Were they not? Was it the one in Ireland?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was. I think it was an island. They were sitting down there, we're talking, and and basically the question was asked, and it was a question that was towards Muhammad Ali and how he talked so much junk in the ring, and came up with all these different ploys and different antics, prior to fights, during fights, and all those type of things. And the man asked the question as to why he did that, why he felt like he needed to do that. And of course, his first answer was that he wanted to intimidate his opponent. He wanted his opponent to be on his heels and unsure about, Muhammad Ali's sanity. He wanted him to think, the man to think that he was fighting a crazy guy was one part of it. But then the other part was that he was saying those things. He was saying that he was the greatest, and he was telling people that he was going to put a major beating on them, because he knew that if he said it, it put pressure on him to train and to perform in a way to back it up. So his thoughts was that he was the greatest. He was saying that he was in the greatest, but also on top of that, he was putting himself in the position. He was putting himself to where the world and everybody around him that heard his words would hold him accountable to everything that he was saying. So that.
But see, you just said two things right there that's so deep that I don't even think that people even caught that yet, or maybe they did. And the two things you said was, number one, your words form your world. Mm-hmm. So thoughts become things. You may not be who you think you are, but what you think you are, and your words form your world. That's the first thing you said. The second thing, which we actually going to have I'm going to either write a blog about it or we're going to have a podcast about it, is this whole concept of the I am, understanding I am that I am, and understanding the I am principle, mm-hmm. right? Because whatever you put before I am, you become that. So it's not a coincidence that Muhammad Ali was the greatest. Why? You know why? Because he put I am in front of it.
Yeah, he made it. He made it so. He made it so. And we can all make it so, just like T.I. But before people even knew who T.I. was claiming himself to be the king of the South. On Rap City, he was the king of the South. Nobody knew who the hell T.I. was. But he knew that he was going to put all his energy into being one of the best rappers to come out of the South, the king of the South. And now when people refer to him, they refer to him as T.I., king of the South. So if you don't believe it and you don't work to achieve it, then nobody else is going to give you credit for it. So you have to be in that mindset, and you have to put that energy and that investment into yourself and make it so known and back it up. Back it up.
And you have to be conscious. So the first thing that he said was, let there be light. So essentially what he was telling us was, hey, in order to create your world, you need to first become conscious of the world that you're creating. So understanding that the current situation that you're in is a result of the thoughts and the words you spoke to create this world. And so now that we know who we are, and now that we understand that we are equipped to continue this journey, it's all downhill from here, because because now we are becoming conscious enough, and we're becoming aware of the world that we're going to create. See, BG, I used to walk every Friday, and I think I mentioned this. Every Friday, I would get up and I would walk to the White House. And there's power in this thing called visualization. And it was actually an interview I saw. The actor being interviewed by Oprah. I forget his name. What's the guy's name that play? Travolta. John Travolta.
John Travolta.
Yeah, I saw an interview, and was it Travolta or was it? It was either Travolta or it was what's the guy that used to play on Living Color?
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey. It was one of the two. I can't remember because I watch a lot of interviews, but one of them talked about visualization, and they talked about how visualization is kind of what sparked their growth. And so I said, okay, what I'm going to do is every Friday, if I missed a Friday, on Sunday, I will go up to the White House and I would just sit there and I would just visualize a lot of things, visualize it. And you know what, you're when you're doing visualization and you're practicing visualization, you know what you're doing? You're actually drawing a picture, and you're creating, basically you're taking your thoughts and putting them in picture format. Visualization is really taking your thoughts and becoming the Michelangelo with your thoughts, and draw and painting a picture of what it is you want to do, or whatever it is you're visualizing. And ultimately your thoughts will become things. So visualization is really a practice of, and an exercise of, having whatever you think about become a thing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I had a friend to build on that. I had a friend that a few years ago introduced me to a concept talking about visualization, a vision board. You know, you have some people that create vision boards to where they take pictures and images and stuff and they put them on the board. And basically what they're putting on their board is their, dreams, things they want to accomplish, things that they want to improve in their day-to-day lives on. And they just put it in a format that they can have a steady reminder. They can look at it and be reminded. It can serve as like a checklist in terms of accomplishments. I was able to accomplish this. And like you say, it's that visualization, it's that continual reminder, it's that dream building concept that you have in place to serve as maybe like a blueprint for where you're trying to go. And so, and it's different for different people because our brains are wired differently. But that is one thing that I've used and implemented, and it's helped me, and it may help other people, to just create something visual that encompasses everything that you want to, have go, right in your life, or things that you want to bring into your life. And it'll serve as maybe just a guide or a checklist for those things. And so that's just another little tidbit, or whatever that can be used to help with that.
Yeah, I've actually created a vision board a few years ago, actually, because I was introduced to that concept from The Secret, from reading The Secret and watching The Secret. So that was the start of this whole visualization practice and this whole vision board. But ultimately, I think that the main thing for this particular podcast, that we kind of wanted to get across to everyone, was this whole idea of consciousness, right? So being aware of the world that you are creating. So when the artist, or when the when the singer sings, "This little light of mine, I'ma let it shine," and when we teach that to our little kids, what exactly are we saying? What we're saying is that become aware become aware of the world that's being created, that you're creating. And now that we know who we are and that we are equipped, moving forward, the world that we create, we need to be aware of the world that we are creating, and make certain that when we create that world, that we're creating it towards our ultimate calling and fulfilling our ultimate purpose.
And the one thing I do want to point out, though, is that this is a process.
Oh, 100.
This is definitely a process. It may not be an overnight thing. You may have to try, fail, try again, but it is a process to where you're working to get to a goal. You're working to get to an ultimate place. So, remain flexible, even in creating things like a vision board and things like that. Some things change based off of timing, opportunity, and all of those particular aspects. So give yourself some room to grow. Be flexible. If something changes, be willing to change. Be willing to adjust and adapt to whatever is going on. Don't put so much pressure on it's got to be right now at this point in time, and it's got to be this. Be flexible because it always changes, and be patient with yourself in this process. And don't give up.
Yeah. You just said it, because ultimately we are learning from life experiences, and life is essentially a boot camp, for lack of better words, a better analogy. It's a boot camp, and life is equipping us to life is equipping us to fulfill a purpose. And so, as your friend stated, the this and that principle, once you understand that you become equipped and you've already defeated the lions and the bears or the tigers or what have you, when it's time to face that giant, you renew your mind and understand that, hey, I can defeat this because we've been here before. That's all I had, man.
In the face of all the obstacles, all the bears, the lions, and the giants, be great. You are great. You're equipped to be great, so be it.
Be great. So anything else you want to plug, man?
Well, let's plug it all. We got the free lunch podcast blog where we keep, we have this type of talk going on, and then some of the other ideas that just come out of the blue. So check us out, freelunchpodcast.blogspot.com, freelunchpodcast.blogspot.com. We've got the Twitter, Free Lunch Pod C. Got Instagram, Free Lunch Podcast. We always update those things. Want to, once again, give credit to my boy Raj at Audio Shapers for our sound. Girl D, check her out at DIAREDDO, Dioredo.com. She's good with the sketches and the illustrations. So if you have any illustration needs, hit her up. She is quick. She has a quick turnaround. She's phenomenal. And keep checking for us every Thursday, iTunes and SoundCloud. We drop a new podcast episode every Thursday. Tell your friends if you haven't already done it. We're coming with heat. The movement is rolling. So now is the time to get on board. Now is definitely the time to ride with the train.
What's that hashtag you created the other day?
Which one?
Hashtag Southern, what'd you say? Southern Perspective hashtag?
Southern Perspective, hashtag what? Southern Hospitality, hashtag New South Movement.
Yeah, that's it. New South Movement, hashtag Free Lunch Podcast. We pushing this thing forward. So
hashtag F the sum up. Yeah, but we love y'all, man. We appreciate your support. We appreciate all the feedback and encouragement. And we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep representing for you all. And we just pray that you keep riding with us and keep enjoying this energy that we put in the atmosphere.
What did it say? Can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop.
Take that. Ow.
Man, let's get up out of here.
Now you gonna take us out?
Dear little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Dear little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Dear little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. We out of here.
Be sorry you gotta pardon me, I'm speaking it awkwardly. Charles Barkley, barking, they ain't biting, I'm getting that green broccoli. Properly giving props to the problem, fulfill prophecy. It gotta be better than that, it gotta be obsolete. Obviously, niggas rolling the dice and this ain't Monopoly. My purpose was to do it on purpose, fucking apology.